17 scars, 12 screws, 1 shattered shoulder, and today, she's ordered to do push-ups. The desert sun exploded over Ironveil Training Complex, flooding the Nevada sand in golden fire. Soldiers slammed their boots against the concrete in a steady rhythm, forming ranks for the dreaded combat fitness test. The morning air was sharp, the kind that bit into your lungs and promised pain before the first rep even began. Before we continue, this is Stories Unseen, where untold military stories come alive. Drop a comment, where are you watching from? We might shout you out in the next video. And if you want to stand with us in every mission, hit subscribe. Soldier. But one figure moved differently. Staff Sergeant Elena Vargas, 31 years old. Combat medic. Her stride was steady, but her left arm clung close to her body, as if protecting something unseen. Beneath the gray Army PT shirt and camo windbreaker, titanium plates and 12 screws held her shoulder together, the only reason she still had an arm after Helmand province. She remembered the blast in flashes, the convoy rolling through dusty roads, the sudden thunder beneath the wheels, the fire swallowing the MATV whole. Shrapnel had torn into her shoulder, ribs, and back as she dragged 3 bleeding soldiers to safety. Surgeons had spent months reconstructing her body at Brooke Army Medical Center. She'd been told she'd never return to duty. Yet here she was, on the training ground with the rest of them, at the front of the formation. Colonel Marcus Doyle prowled like a wolf among sheep. His reputation stretched across bases, ruthless, uncompromising, the kind of commander who believed excuses were cancer. 20 years in uniform had sharpened him into something harder than steel. Soldiers whispered he could break a man down with a single glare. Listen up. Doyle's voice cracked like a whip across the field. Today, combat fitness test, push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run. I don't want to hear your excuses, your profiles, or your sob stories. You signed up to be warriors, so prove it. The formation roared back. Yes, Sir Elena's stomach tightened. Push-ups. Always the push-ups. The therapy had helped, but pain still shot like lightning when she lowered her body weight onto her arms. She had a medical profile authorizing modifications, but she had never dared show it to Doyle. She knew exactly what he thought of paperwork. To him, pain was weakness leaving the body. As the line dropped to the ground, Vargas followed. Her palms pressed the sand-coated concrete. She lowered once. White-hot fire tore through her shoulder. Twice more, and her body trembled. On the 4th attempt, her arm buckled, and she collapsed halfway down. Around her, soldiers powered through in rhythm, but their eyes flickered sideways, stealing glances at the medic gasping for air. Vargas clenched her jaw, forcing another rep. The pain was unbearable. Sweat dripping not from exertion but from nerves screaming through her body. A shadow fell across her. Heavy boots stopped inches from her face. She looked up, breath ragged. Colonel Doyle? His expression was carved from stone, only his eyes alive with contempt. This is pathetic, he said, voice loud enough for the entire company to hear. I've seen cadets on their first day show more grit. What's wrong with you, Sergeant, or are you just looking for a way out? Heat flushed Vargas's face. She wanted to scream about Helmand, about dragging brothers in arms out of burning steel while her own blood poured into the sand. But military discipline sealed her lips. Her fellow soldiers looked on, unease rippling through the ranks. They knew who she was. They knew what she'd done. But against a colonel, silence was the only survival. Vargas pressed her palms into the concrete, pushing through the agony. Her shoulders shook violently. She locked eyes with Doyle, and in that instant, the training field felt less like Nevada desert and more like a battlefield where a different kind of war was about to begin. The word coward echoed in her skull, louder than the blast that had almost killed her. Elena Vargas straightened her spine and met Colonel Marcus Doyle's eyes with a fire he hadn't expected. For the first time since the confrontation began, her expression shifted, not submission, not restraint, but something sharper, unshakable, without a word. Her fingers reached for the zipper of her camo windbreaker. The sound split the silence like a rifle shot. Every soldier froze. Doyle frowned, not yet understanding what she was doing. The ranks craned their necks as Vargas slid her arms free of the sleeves, each movement a quiet defiance. Her injured shoulder winced, but her hands folded the jacket neatly and set it on the sand. Now she stood in nothing but her gray Army PT shirt. Doyle's smirk faltered through the fabric. Dark ridges and patches broke the outline of her skin. These weren't tattoos. They weren't birthmarks. The whispers started low, uneasy, as recognition spread through those who had served with her overseas. Then Vargas did the unthinkable. She gripped the hem of her shirt and pulled it upward, exposing the truth for all to see. Gasps rippled across the training ground, sharp intakes of breath carrying farther than Doyle's insults ever had. Her body told a story no words could. Surgical scars crisscrossed her shoulder and back, jagged proof of surgeons stitching her back together after the mine blast in Helmand. Shrapnel marks peppered her skin like burned constellations. A thick scar carved from her shoulder blade to her ribs glared under the sun, a wound that had nearly ended her life. Colonel Doyle's face drained of color. He had expected a faint scar, maybe a bruise exaggerated for sympathy. Instead, he was staring at the body of a warrior rebuilt from fire and steel. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The desert wind hissed through the training field, every soldier staring at Vargas. No one saw weakness anymore. They saw survival. They saw sacrifice. They saw a medic who had bled so others could live. Her voice broke the silence, steady as a command. "These scars are from Helmand. Sir, I was a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne when a TM-62 mine tore our convoy apart. It threw me against our MATV, filled my body with shrapnel." She turned, pointing to each scar as if reading from a ledger of sacrifice. "This one metal inches from my heart. This one where they rebuilt my shoulder blade. These smaller ones from dozens of fragments they pulled out of my back and arms." The murmurs swelled. Soldiers nodded. Some had their own scars, their own nights in field hospitals, and they recognized every line on her body for what it was proof of duty. "The doctors told me I'd never raise this arm again. They said I was lucky to even keep it." Her voice grew firmer. 8 months of hospitals, 8 months learning how to use my body again. But I didn't choose to quit. I chose to fight my way back because I still believe in serving my country, and in standing for my brothers and sisters in uniform. Doyle's face flushed red now, the weight of his mistake pressing down like a mountain. The soldiers around him exchanged looks: disgust, disbelief, quiet respect for Vargas. They had just witnessed their colonel call a decorated combat medic a coward, and Vargas wasn't finished speaking. She was just beginning to turn the tide. The silence after Elena Vargas revealed her scars was heavier than any mortar blast. For 4 searing seconds, the Nevada desert seemed to hold its breath. Dozens of soldiers stared at the truth carved across her body, and Colonel Marcus Doyle could no longer hide behind rank or arrogance. He wasn't facing weakness, he was facing living proof of sacrifice. Vargas kept her shirt raised, her voice ringing steady, cutting through the stunned ranks. "Each scar you see is a choice I made, duty over safety. The night I was hit, I was treating 3 wounded when the mine detonated, even bleeding, even half broken. I worked until the Blackhawks lifted us out. 2 men are alive today because I refused to quit." Nods rippled through the formation. Veterans of combat zones recognize the kind of courage you can't fake, moments when training and instinct override fear, when you act not to survive yourself, but to keep others breathing. Doyle finally found his voice, but it cracked. "Staff Sergeant Vargas." I didn't know. His words stumbled, hollow even to his own ears. For the first time in his career, The colonel had nothing to stand on. Vargas lowered her shirt, the scars now hidden but impossible to forget. She zipped her windbreaker slowly, deliberately. The pain in her shoulder was sharp, permanent, but she'd already made her point. "Sir, I've never asked for special treatment. I have a medical profile." "Yes, but I've always served in every capacity I could. My injuries don't excuse me from my duty. They remind me why I still stand." Doyle's hands trembled at his sides. He knew what this meant. He hadn't just questioned a soldier's resilience, he had humiliated a decorated combat medic in front of the entire company. The story would spread across Ironveil before noon. His reputation would collapse faster than any wall on the obstacle course. Murmurs surged through the ranks, soldiers exchanging looks that ranged from disbelief to disgust. They had just watched a colonel call a war hero a coward. That stain wouldn't wash out. The spell broke when Sergeant First Class David Harker, a grizzled veteran of 2 Afghanistan tours, stepped forward. His voice carried like artillery across the silence. "Staff Sergeant Vargas served in my unit overseas. She's one of the finest soldiers I've ever stood beside." The dam burst. Specialist Martinez shouted from the ranks. "She dragged me out of a burning MATV," and Helmand Corporal Williams added. "She saved my life twice in one deployment. Best combat medic in theater." More voices rose, soldiers eager to testify, their words hammering Doyle harder than any reprimand could. Each story stripped away another layer of his authority. The colonel's face twisted, pale under the desert sun. Every commendation Vargas had earned now stood as an indictment of his arrogance. He had been so blinded by what he thought was weakness that he couldn't see the strength staring him in the face. Vargas said nothing. She didn't need to. Her brothers in arms were speaking now, building a wall of truth around her. She stood quietly, eyes steady, absorbing their loyalty. These were the people who knew her in the only place that mattered under fire. When lives balanced on seconds, the morning sun climbed higher, stretching shadows long across the sand. What had begun as routine PT had transformed into a reckoning. It wasn't about push-ups anymore. It was about leadership, respect, and the failure of a man who had forgotten what service meant. Colonel Doyle stood in the center of it all, surrounded not by obedience but by disappointment, by anger, by the unmistakable fracture of trust. The rank on his chest no longer shielded him. His soldiers looked at him differently now, not as a leader, but as a man who had been measured and found lacking, and Doyle knew the consequences wouldn't stop at this field. The real judgment was only beginning. The morning at Ironveil Training Complex ended in silence, but the echoes of what had happened stretched far beyond the desert field. Elena Vargas had stood at attention, jacket zipped, bearing intact. She had not raised her voice, had not broken discipline. Instead, she let the truth of her scars speak louder than any defense could. Colonel Marcus Doyle's apology came quietly, almost broken. His words might have been correct, but no one mistook them for sincere. The formation knew the power dynamic had shifted forever. Soldiers didn't see a commanding officer anymore. They saw a man stripped of authority by his own arrogance, and they saw a medic who had just defended not only herself, but every wounded warrior who had ever been underestimated. By noon, the story was everywhere, from the chow hall to the motor pool. Soldiers repeated the scene, a colonel calling a hero a coward, and the hero showing him what courage really looked like. The tale traveled fast, reaching command offices and briefing rooms within hours. The judgment came swifter than Doyle expected. Stripped of command, reassigned to a desk, his career effectively ended not by bullets or bombs, but by his own blindness. For Vargas, the days that followed brought something different. General Andrew Whitmore summoned her, not to question, but to apologize. He made it clear her record spoke louder than any colonel's insult. 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star for valor, and a list of commendations that proved her sacrifice. More than that, He told her the Army would review policies, ensuring no wounded warrior would again be shamed for scars earned in battle. Invitations followed, conferences, symposiums, leadership courses. Vargas became a voice for those who carried the hidden weight of war. She never asked for the spotlight, but she used it, teaching commanders that knowing your soldiers meant more than reading their scores on a PT test. It meant understanding the price of their service, the invisible burdens they carried, and the courage it took to keep showing up. Years later, the training field at Ironveil was still used every morning. Soldiers dropped for push-ups, ran their miles, climbed their walls. But whispers lingered the story of the medic who unzipped her jacket and silenced a colonel. New recruits heard it from veterans who'd been there. Officers studied it in leadership schools. It became part of the base's history, a reminder that strength is not measured in numbers but in sacrifice. Elena Vargas bore her scars until the end of her career. They never stopped aching, never stopped reminding her of the night Helmand almost claimed her life. But she learned to see them not as wounds, but as proof that she had chosen duty over comfort, others over herself, proof that she had earned the right to be called a warrior. And in the quiet moments, when asked what she took from that morning, her answer was simple. Strength isn't about push-ups. It's about never leaving your people behind. It's about standing, even when standing hurts. That was her legacy. The lesson carried forward long after the pain faded. True courage isn't perfect bodies or flawless records. True courage is sacrifice, dignity, and the will to serve.